Tonight, that's a wrap on the Toronto International Film Festival.
It was so exciting, and I feel so honored to win the Best Canadian Short at TIFF because this film, it's my most personal film. It means a lot to me.
From red carpets to awards, we'll have the highlights from this year's TIFF. Plus,
we're all excited to have him because he's a symbol of hope.
Refugees from Uganda who fled violence and persecution gather in Toronto for a special visit from a popular politician. And
right now we're in the midst of doing our recovery and our response.
Thousands of customers in the Maritimes are still without power tonight after post-tropical storm Lee. We'll have the latest on the damage and the cleanup. It's the final day of the Toronto International Film Festival. The 10-day festival brought hundreds of thousands of visitors to the city. Today, awards were handed out to some of the industry's brightest stars. Dale Manukduk has more.
Jasmine Mosafari and her friends are celebrating her birthday tonight.
These celebrations all wrapped up into one day, so this is one of the most special days of my life.
Earlier in the day, Mosafari took home the Shortcuts Award for Best Canadian Film at TIFF. Her film Motherland takes place during 1979 at the height of the Iran hostage crisis. It follows a man as he goes on a trip to meet his fiance's parents and ends up confronting the realities of what it means to be an Iranian immigrant. The movie was inspired by her father.
He was an Iranian immigrant. He came to the U.S. During the Iranian Revolution. And, when he was dating my mom, her parents wouldn't speak to him for 2 years, or both of them for 2 years, when they found out she was marrying an Iranian person.
Motherland was one of 50 Canadian titles to feature at TIFF this year. Taking home the Best Canadian Feature Film Award was Solo, a coming-of-age story taking place in Montreal's drag community. Themes of diversity and inclusion were prominent during the festival.
My two favorites were Solo, which is a Canadian film about the drag scene in Montreal, and then also Naga, which is from Saudi Arabia, because I'm Arab and queer, so it was nice to see both sides of myself represented on screen.
While there was plenty of representation on screen, there was a lack of star power on the red carpet. The writers and actors strikes happening south of the border made a noticeable difference at the 48th year of TIFF.
I think that the strike did impact it, but overall it's still a very good festival. A lot of big stars came out, like Sylvester Stallone.
I've watched the film at least once a day. It's beautiful. Beautiful seeing the global stories. It's inspiring. I just feel so proud to be here. I cried a little.
And that is seen on the Toronto International Film Festival 2023. Planning for 2024 has already begun. It'll run from September 5th to the 15th. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
A man in his 50s suffered serious injuries tonight after a stabbing at Victoria Park subway station. Police were called to the scene at 6:20 p.m. for reports that a man was stabbed. The suspect fled on foot and is described as a male in his 20s, 5'8", and wearing yellow shoes. Paramedics transported the victim to hospital. Anyone with information is asked to contact police. A Toronto police officer was taken to hospital last night after an assault at Kibling subway station. Police were called to the bus boarding area of the station around 7:30 p.m. for reports of a man assaulting several people. Toronto paramedics transported an officer to hospital with minor injuries. Police say a man is in custody. The officer is now recovering at home. It's been a violent weekend for Toronto cops. Another officer was taken to hospital with minor injuries after being hit by a cyclist this afternoon. Police say the rider was cycling erratically and was directed to stop. The cyclist was arrested after the incident. In a statement, the Toronto Police Association said, quote, "These cases remind us of the dangerous situations that our members face each and every day while keeping our community safe." In a post to X, Mayor Olivia Chow said, wishing the officers injured this weekend a speedy recovery. They put themselves in dangerous situations and they have our gratitude. Hundreds of refugees in Toronto who fled violence and persecution gathered today for a visit from a popular Ugandan politician. This as thousands of people rallied across Canada calling for equal rights for migrant workers. Anam Khan reports.
So the king asked me.
Dominion Church International was one of the few Black-led churches to open its doors to hundreds of asylum seekers after they were denied access to Toronto's overwhelmed shelter system. The church is now providing shelter to over 250 asylum seekers, mostly from Uganda. Today, they got a visit from someone who gives them hope. Bobi Wine, a leader of the opposition party in their home country.
So we came to reconnect and fight from all fronts to make sure that we make it fine back home so they can come back home.
Wine is a leader of the National Unity Platform political party in Uganda. He's also a singer and an actor. But for many Ugandan refugees, he's a guiding light.
We're all excited to have him because he's a symbol of hope. Those who fled Uganda because of the LGBTQ signed the law by Museveni, and those who fled Uganda because of the torture of political persecutions or fear of imprisonment or death.
Supporters of the cause joined the asylum seekers in church, where Wine spoke about their united dream of a safer Uganda, something refugees like Dennis Bryan's Keisuka pray for every day. Keisuka came to Toronto in July, fleeing political persecution. He left behind a wife and 2 children.
My future hope is to bring my family. I'm a married man, and my family is not safe because it's still of politics and some domestic violence from one of the leaders in the ruling party.
While Wine gave hope to many asylum seekers, thousands of people in Toronto marched, calling for permanent resident status for thousands of undocumented people in Canada, including asylum seekers.
Without permanent resident status, migrant and undocumented people are facing massive exploitation at work, are denied life-saving treatments in healthcare, live in daily fear of deportation and the pain of family separation.
The rally was held in 15 major cities across the country. Supporters say a permanent resident status will help everyone in Canada thrive. Anam Khan, CBC News, Toronto.
4 people were taken to hospital after a downtown stabbing early this morning. Toronto police were called to Adelaide and Simcoe shortly after 3 a.m. 2 victims were rushed to hospital with life-threatening injuries. They're now in stable condition. The other 2 victims were treated for minor injuries. No suspect information has been released. Over to Scarborough now, where a young man is dead after crashing his motorcycle on Highway 401. Ontario Provincial Police say the crash happened around 5 a.m. in the eastbound express lanes near Markham Road. Police say the 19-year-old driver was from Pickering. Any witnesses are asked to contact police. Clearing debris and restoring power. That was the order of the day in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. Post-tropical storm Lee moved through yesterday. Today, there was relief it was not stronger, but also a recognition that storm season isn't over. Shayna Luck reports.
In the middle of the storm, Darren Hudson took on a tricky operation.
We're going to set a line on these trees, pull them crosswind, and with enough of a strain and good felling direction, we should get it down.
As an arborist, Hudson makes a living cutting down trees in southwest Nova Scotia. He took action after one of his own trees came down and cut off his power. He was one of hundreds of thousands of Nova Scotians who lost electricity during Lee. In New Brunswick, it brought down the canopy of a gas station in New Maryland and caused some local flooding. But for many Maritimers, it didn't feel like much of an emergency.
Well, it's not as bad as Fiona.
It's definitely a less intense storm than last year's Fiona, which destroyed roads and homes and cut off power for nearly 500,000 people in the province.
We certainly had trees falling on power lines, but we didn't necessarily have power poles snapping in half.
Restoration is expected to go faster than last year. It's easier to put lines back up than replace hundreds of poles. Some left nothing to chance. Last year, this family convenience store had only 1 generator, and it wasn't enough.
So during Fiona, we lost all our ice cream, we lost all our dairy.
And over the noise of their generators, they barely noticed the storm last night.
We weren't able to hear anything. It was a shock when we saw all the branches outside because it didn't feel like much.
Many in the region learning from past disasters.
We didn't have to use the preparation that we had for the worst, for sure.
St. John, New Brunswick lost about 50 trees. They were expecting more.
Tropical storm status, the rain and wind status was all downgraded at midnight last night. So, that was a relief.
But not everyone was spared. The damage, a reminder of the danger. Hurricane season, not over until November. Shayna Luck, CBC News, Halifax.
Sophia Kambalia joins us now for a first look at the forecast, and that storm has passed, but as we just saw, left behind quite a bit of damage.
Yeah, a really high impact system. Here's a look at it now. Current conditions, just the remnants of that system up in the North Gulf of the St. Lawrence. Still some soggy conditions in parts of Newfoundland this hour, and still seeing some of those outages between 24 and 27,000 still without power in parts of Nova Scotia. Those are current numbers. Bit of a reprieve for everybody in Atlantic Canada on Monday with some dry weather, and then more wet weather arrives Tuesday and Wednesday with the system heading up the U.S. eastern seaboard. More salt in the wounds. We had our share of wet weather throughout the southern Great Lakes Basin. These lines of disorganized storms came through the region throughout the afternoon and evening hours. So heavy for some that there were afternoon rainfall warnings anywhere really from Guelph to London and into Hamilton area with some heavy rain and localized flooding. That upper level trough and some of that wraparound of that system still around central and eastern Ontario, and that wraparound will continue for the nation's capital region, along with some chillier conditions for your Monday morning. We're on the cool side of seasonal for Monday. But then high pressure sets in Tuesday and Wednesday coming up in the long range. I'll tell you all about the chill and the fall-like temperatures coming in for the early part of this work week, and then the resurgence of summer in the late week. Good news to come, Talia.
Looking forward to that. Thanks, Sophia.
You're welcome.
British media today were poring over accusations against an entertainment celebrity. The man at the center of it was actor Russell Brand. The accusations from a documentary last night were of sexual assaults. Katie Simpson reports.
Russell Brand did not let the accusations of rape, sexual assault, and emotional abuse alter his schedule, going ahead with a London comedy gig shortly after the disturbing allegations surfaced.
I was like, oh my God, he raped me.
4 women have come forward with claims of attacks and abuse between 2006 and 2013.
He's like, you're like my little dolly.
One says she was just 16 when she was sexually assaulted. Claims published in the UK by The Times, The Sunday Times, and the Channel 4 broadcaster as part of a joint investigation. CBC News has not independently verified the claims. To protect identities, actors were hired to share some of the women's stories.
He pushed me up against the wall. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm telling him to get off me, and he won't get off.
What I seriously refute are these very, very serious criminal allegations.
Brand adamantly denied any wrongdoing in a video posted on social media.
As I've written about extensively in my books, I was very, very promiscuous. Now, during that time of promiscuity, the relationships I had were absolutely always consensual.
So right here, buddy. The allegations have prompted internal investigations where Brand used to work, including at the BBC and Channel 4. Police have urged potential victims of crimes to formally file reports, while the fallout is getting attention at the highest levels.
And I think we have to be particularly careful when we listen to the voices of the people who are relatively powerless, because we, I think, collectively have missed opportunities to do the right thing.
For a world exclusive.
Brand is now a self-described wellness guru, indulging in conspiracy theories with right-wing figures.
Thanks for joining us, Tucker Carlson.
Attracting more than 6 million subscribers on YouTube alone. The fringes of the internet are seizing on this moment, dismissing the allegations as a plot to silence one of their own. Katie Simpson, CBC News, London.
Canada is pledging $33 million to fund providing air defense equipment for Ukraine. Britain is leading the initiative, and it was at a British military camp that Canadian Defence Minister Bill Blair made the announcement.
And the purpose of this coalition is to procure high-priority air defense equipment for the Ukraine, including hundreds of short and medium-range air defensive missiles, associated systems, to enable the Ukraine to protect itself from Russian aggression.
Blair says it's part of the $500 million package announced in June. Ottawa has committed over $8 billion in aid to Ukraine so far. Almost a quarter of it is military assistance. As the war in Ukraine continues, cities across the country are seeing massive destruction. Here in Toronto, a team of Canadian and Ukrainian architects are looking for ways to help. WZMH Architects is developing solutions aimed at rebuilding Ukraine and restoring its spaces. The team showcased their work this weekend at the Bloor West Village Ukrainian Festival. Zenon Radowich is principal architect at the firm. He joins me now to talk about this project. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
So tell us a bit about your project and how it will help address the housing crisis in Ukraine.
So we developed this concept called Speed Stack. It's a prefabricated concrete solution for mainly residential buildings, but we've been actually studying it for other types of buildings, small medical buildings, etc., with Ukrainian architects in Ukraine. And the idea is that these prefabricated modules are built in a factory, delivered to the site, and then basically assembled like Lego blocks. So you could very quickly kind of put together a building of, up to 10, 15, 20 stories tall, to basically, build these buildings very quick on site with limited amount of labor, because most of the labor is actually utilized in factories. So the concept really is prefab modular and built out of concrete, so it's pretty durable, very strong, and then also includes other prefabricated elements. But the whole concept is about rebuilding those destroyed buildings in Ukraine.
And I understand you shared some of that work at the Ukrainian Festival this weekend. What was that experience like, and what kind of responses did you hear from the community?
So the experience was amazing, and we spent a lot of time, and a big part of the presentation that we made in Bloor West Village at the festival was about the work that was completed by Ukrainian students and Ukrainian professionals utilizing our Speed Stack module. So over the last year, we held a number of competitions, a few design research internship programs, where these Ukrainian students and architects utilized our solution to develop concepts for many types of buildings. So the idea at the festival was to basically present their concepts to basically the people of Toronto that were visiting the festival. And, we got a lot of positive response, a lot of people that came by that basically asked how can they help, can they donate, can they, be involved in maybe doing some mentoring. Some of them are architects, engineers, urban planners, so amazing response.
And what process is the project at? Has any of the work started on the ground in Ukraine?
So it's slowly kind of building momentum. I would say about 6-7 months ago, maybe a bit longer, we were actually looking at building some pilot projects. But the war really escalated in terms of the amount of missiles that were landing in some of the key cities, power outages, etc. So we kind of changed our focus towards education and working with the professionals to kind of further study and develop the concepts. So we kind of went down that road. Now we're actually kind of getting back to, okay, let's get the pilot project built. So we're talking to a number of builders, companies that specialize in concrete work to get a pilot project built. But really the last, I would say, 6 to 7 months has really been more about working with the professionals there and students so they can learn about the system and look at different building types. So, initially we were looking at residential buildings. They've now designed buildings, like I mentioned, medical buildings, community centers, fire stations, for example, military buildings utilizing the Speed Stack modules. We assembled some really good documentation that we sent off to Ukrainian government officials who are now looking at potentially utilizing this system for some of the buildings. So it's been a lot of, call it R&D and called professional development work. And now I think we're getting ready to look at some pilot projects.
And finally, what does it mean to you and your staff to be able to remain connected to their home in this way?
I think it means a lot. It's amazing. I mean, I think it's one thing for Ukrainians to come over here and just find a job, but the Ukrainians that are working in our office, they're working on projects that are Canadian-based, but many of them are doing this work for Ukraine, and I think they're very proud, very excited. They want to somehow help and assist with what's happening back home. And these projects that we're doing, the design internship programs, the hackathons that we're doing, all of these projects basically are really are very important to them and really making a difference in terms of they're doing work back home.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
That was Zenon Radowich on how his firm is developing solutions aimed at rebuilding Ukraine. The Roncesvalles Polish Festival is back this weekend for its 16th year, celebrating all things Polish culture. Aside from traditional folk dancing performances and snacks like pierogies, the event also features busker zones and carnival games. The festival wraps up tonight. And the Terry Fox Run kicked off today, carrying on the legacy of one of Canada's most influential athletes.
Well, I think Terry embodies the Canadian spirit, and I think we come together each year to have a little Canadiana and celebrate everything that he did and that we're trying to do in his honor.
The run is in its 43rd year, with all donations going towards cancer research. Terry's journey to run across Canada began in April 1980 in St. John's, Newfoundland, and has grown to be a tradition that brings hundreds of communities together every year. Sophia's back now with our extended forecast, and not a bad day for a run. It actually felt quite warm midday.
Yeah, it was shorts and t-shirt weather in that afternoon sunshine. Talia, we're actually a couple degrees above seasonal around the region, so it felt lovely. Not much more you can ask for getting towards the end of September. Sunday's daytime highs will be very different from Monday, but along with that heat in the afternoon, we had a little bit of storm energy. There's a snapshot at some of those downpours that came down, especially for those of you in southwestern Ontario. The rain will continue into Monday, especially for some sparse showers around the Ottawa Valley region and parts of Cottage Country and in central Ontario. But then high pressure moves in, so does the cold. Let's watch this play out. Sunday evening, we're around seasonal conditions, getting to the chillier side of seasonal, especially in parts of Georgian Bay area. For your Monday morning and Monday afternoon, barely in the double digits. And then that high pressure, that lid that comes off the top of the pot and lets out all of the warm air, really comes in Monday into Tuesday. Look at that, single digits for your Tuesday morning, close to some frosty conditions in parts of northern Ontario as well. It's a 1 to 2 day dip to the cooler side of seasonal for Monday night into Tuesday morning before a ridge of high pressure looks to build back up. Our normal average first day to frost is not until mid-October, so we still have some time to go before that. But the good news is, after this little bit of a cold spell, warm conditions into next weekend, and that'll be the first day of fall next Saturday, when temperatures will be in the high 20s and approaching a feels like into the 30s. So we have that to look forward to as we head into fall lake season. Talia.
Thanks, Sophia. And that's our show for you tonight. Thanks so much for watching. Before we go, we'll leave you with one last look at some of the highlights of this year's Polish Festival. Good night.